Welcome to the Life Support Podcast with me, Carl Monson, and Dr. John Briffa, where we offer actionable advice on handling work, life, and everything in between. John, how are you?
I'm very good. I've been on my travels this week.
All right, anywhere nice? Oh, Madrid. Okay, yeah.
I've never been to Madrid.
Right.
I liked it.
Yes.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it. Yeah, I was speaking at an event on Wednesday, and I flew in on Tuesday because I couldn't get in on the day, and that meant I got to go to a gala dinner, and that was lovely in a beautiful place, nice food. But I also got to listen to and sit next to the kind of the motivational guest speaker for the evening, Spanish guy who Fantastic. Had slipped off a cliff and broken his pelvis in 2 or 3 places and basically spent 3 days on a beach on his own, stranded before he decided to try and swim for it.
Yikes.
Obviously, he made it.
It sounds like he made it.
He's a lovely bloke, by the way.
Yeah.
There's a Netflix film about him, apparently.
Oh, okay.
I think it's called Solo or something like that. Wow. He doesn't like the film. I don't think that's a secret. He was lovely, though. Like a really lovely... I sat next to him. Did I mention that? They sat me next to him at the gala dinner.
Yes, I know you Spanish BFF who you're at the gala dinner with.
Yeah, that's it, right. I won't be talking to you as much in the future, Carl.
No, I understand. Because
I'm very fickle and I've moved on to someone else.
Jose in Madrid or wherever you're off to. Right, okay. But in the meantime, we're going to be talking about chewing, shadow work, and a nice finish today, random acts of kindness, a nice thing to go off with, I think, random acts. Well, we'll find out our collective view on that. Let's start with chewing, John. Why? And maybe we need to get out the way that for the immature listener here, and we know you're there, let's get the word mastication out of the way first and foremost, shall we?
Yeah.
You were covering
I'll come back to that word, actually, because you reminded me of something, but we'll get to it later. So chewing, it's such a basic thing, but I think it's something that in a way we take for granted, because most of us, I don't know, when I say us, I'm just talking about normal, if I can use this term, Western people, tend to eat quite quickly. You went to public school, so you probably eat very quickly because you're on a terrible schedule or something.
I feel like I need to defend myself on a number of levels with that accusation. But yes.
Well, also, I'm the fifth of 5 children, so I ate quickly. But for different reasons.
Yes. Okay.
Have you heard of this concept called food insecurity?
Yes, I think we mentioned Tony
Robbins. It doesn't matter how much food is available. There's a feeling that there isn't quite enough. I definitely have had that. It's a bit less acute than it was when I was younger, but I definitely have it because I have these. I'll get onto the chewing in a moment, but I have these memories of food being served in order of age. Does that make sense? And there's 5 kids.
Yes,
And we're going down the line, and this little chicken is being carved, and as it's getting smaller and smaller, I'm realizing, and I am also the smallest, okay, but I'm already getting insecure about how much food I'm going to be served, and with no real capacity, because I was quite passive as a child, to say, excuse me, but that isn't really enough food. So there's a kind of deep set thing. Anyway.
No,
leaving that's that to one side. Maybe we can return to that when we talk about.
I think you can't leave me hanging there with that awful pain that I'm picking up. And I thought the end of the story would be, and that's why I never eat chicken's feet or neck to this day, because you ended up your gizzards. Yes.
No, but I still have an element of this. For example, at the gala dinner I just mentioned, they're actually carving meat. On the side and then putting it on plates and then serving it to the people. We're in cabaret, circular tables.
Yes.
And the first thing I do when they put the food down is assess it for portion size.
Really?
I'm not even thinking about what it is. It's actually sirloin. But that's the first thing that I'm thinking about as it hits the table. How does that, in terms of size, compare to the guest speaker here and the
the surrogate siblings you've created around you?
That's exactly right. That's exactly
right. Yeah. Wow. These are old habits that die hard, absolutely, for sure. And chewing, to come back to the subject, is one of them.
Yeah, come back to that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for getting me back on track.
My pleasure. Yeah.
So chewing. All right. So as I mentioned, a lot of people eat quite quickly. And that can sort of bypass chewing. But what is chewing actually for? So chewing does a number of different things. So first of all, when you start to chew food, you're essentially sending signals to the other parts of the body to say food is on its way, get ready, basically. So we may then ramp up our production of certain things like acid in the stomach and digestive enzymes, for example. We're sort of priming the pump for the digestive process. Okay, that's the first thing. Secondly, in saliva, there's at least one, maybe two enzymes that actually help the digestion of food. So the one that's most well known is something called amylase. And amylase is important for the digestion, essentially, of starch. So that, if you're not chewing, you're potentially bypassing that a bit. But the main effect of chewing, that I don't think should be ignored, is that you're basically breaking food up into smaller particles. And what you're doing is you're allowing much more surface area of the food to be exposed to, later on, the acid and digestive enzymes lower down in the gut. So it's a bit like this. If you imagine I have a glass of water here, I take a couple of ice cubes, I drop them into the water, but before I do that, I crush one of them. The other one stays whole. Which ice cube melts most quickly?
The broken one.
Yeah, and it's the same with food in the stomach, for example. The more it's broken up, the smaller the particles, the more surface area is available to be attacked, if you like, by the acid and then later by digestive enzymes. The more readily it breaks down, dissolves, if you like, and digests. It actually makes the digestive process much easier. And the reality is that, many individuals, have a degree of indigestion.
Yeah.
What in medicine is sometimes called dyspepsia, just means indigestion, with a Latin bent maybe. But anyway, the point is why is that? Well, a lot of it is often said to be related to too much acid in the stomach. But actually, I can tell you from experience and also some evidence in this area that the vast majority of people with dyspepsia don't have high levels of acid. They have low levels of acid in their stomach, sometimes called hypochlorhydria. And the problem with that is that acid is incredibly important in digestion, particularly for protein, by the way. And if you don't have enough acid, food tends to stick a bit in the stomach, tends to ferment a bit. And then you can get, for example, bubbling up of stomach contents into the esophagus or food pipe, which is where the heartburn comes from. And it feels acidic because the esophagus shouldn't have any acid in it. So even though these are lower levels of acid than actually should be there, it still feels acidic. Do you see? Yes. And then if you basically take a drug to stop acid, like sometimes called a proton pump inhibitor, like omeprazole, something like that, then the acid basically goes to zero, and now it no longer feels acidic. But you actually haven't dealt with the underlying problem. You've actually worsened the underlying problem.
Yes, you made an unholy mess, haven't you, that you're no longer aware of?
A bit, yes, and a lot of people are caught in this cycle because when they stop the antacid, they get like a bit of a rush of acid, if that makes sense, and that bubbles up into the esophagus and they feel acidic again. By the way, there's another couple of mechanisms here that are useful to bear in mind. Actually, I wasn't planning on talking about acid, but anyway, while we're here, let's keep going. So first of all, acid is important for the integrity, really, of the valve at the bottom of the esophagus that stops acid getting from the stomach back up into the food pipe. So if your levels of acid are a bit low, that valve tends to be a bit lax, and that makes it more likely you're going to get reflux, up into the esophagus. The other thing is that, the stomach in health should be very acidic indeed, about 2 pH, which is really very acidic. If you put it on your car bonnet, it would sort of burn a hole in the paint.
Wow.
But why aren't we burning a hole in the lining of our stomach? Because we have a protective lining made of something called mucin. It's like a thick mucus, basically. The problem is that we don't really make mucin, Carl, if we don't have very much acid. And what this means is a lot of people have very underprotected stomachs, if that makes sense. So even when they have lower than normal levels of acid, again, it feels acidic. But the
Yes.
problem isn't that they have too much acid. They're just not protected against it in certain
Yeah.
instances. Is this making
Yeah.
some sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the thing is then, you want to make digestion as efficient as possible, okay? However much acid you've got in your stomach, basically, the more you chew the food, the more you chew it down basically to a cream. By the way, don't ask me whether I do this or not. I absolutely
Yeah.
don't. Okay,
Same
but I
here.
also don't have any dyspeptic symptoms because I think, I don't know for certain. I think I have very good levels of stomach acid. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So it becomes a bit less important. But for a lot of people who struggle a bit with their food, do have dyspepsia, indigestion symptoms, it becomes critically important. Okay. Now, by the way, one sign sometimes worth looking out for low levels of stomach acid is food getting a bit stuck. And I don't mean, in the chest, in the esophagus. I mean, it goes down into the stomach and then it sits there longer than you feel it should. I'll give you a
Yeah.
classic example of this. This is really bad, right? They'll go to a gala dinner, they'll eat sirloin. I mean,
For
meat, I think,
example.
is a very good food. Beef, I think, is a great food. Okay, I really do. Okay, but it isn't easy to digest. I'll say
Yeah.
that. Okay,
Yeah.
so they'll do this. They'll have their sirloin. They'll do some other things, eat some other foods that, perhaps make it harder to digest, and then drinking with it also not particularly helpful. I'll explain why in a moment. They'll do that. They'll go to bed. They feel a bit bloated. Okay, they wake up in the morning, and the first thing they do is burp. And when they burp, they can taste sirloin in their mouth because it's still sitting there.
There's a
Now
very
that would be quite extreme, but that does happen. That does
well, it
happen.
would be
I'll
a
tell you an
graphic
anecdote, by the way. I'll tell you an
indication. A
anecdote.
graphic indication. Yes. Yeah.
I had a patient once that told me about how he'd had these long-standing problems with digestion, feeling bloated, dyspepsia, feeling food wouldn't really go down. He said, "I will eat." By the way, he's the only patient that ever told me this. And he goes, "What I do is I regurgitate I hope you've all had breakfast or lunch or dinner out there listening to this.
Mhm.
I will regurgitate food into my mouth, re-chew it, and then re-swallow it. Okay. Now,
In a
what's going on
a
there?
very
Now, you would
bovine way.
expect, given how acidic stomach acid is, that you would have terrible dental erosion, not decay, erosion. Imagine putting a tooth in some hydrochloric acid. Okay. It dissolves, right? But
That's
actually, his dentition was fine. Why is that? Because he's got no acid. That's why. That's why he's having to regurgitate his food.
And he's able to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Because that's the other thing. You might vomit it out as well on account of its taste. And yeah.
Anyway,
Right,
the point
okay.
is that chewing is actually very important. And I
Yes.
would generally encourage people, if they can, slow down a bit and chew it more or less to a cream before you swallow it. Now, one tip around this I would give is this. This becomes very difficult to do if you allow yourself to get very hungry before you eat. It's all
Correct.
good and well you saying, well, chew your food thoroughly. But once people get very hungry, they basically inhale food.
Yam
Like
it
a
in,
dog.
yes.
You've
Yes.
seen it. Do you have dogs, by the way?
Like my dad used to do. Yes, dogs.
Okay.
Whilst they're protecting their food from the other dog, just wolf it down. I mean, that's the word
Yeah.
we use, isn't it?
Yeah,
Wolfing
exactly.
it down.
Wolf it down.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, my dad used to do that, and I have inherited that, unfortunately. And also, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? Like you say, if you grew up needing to eat quickly, school conditioning, whatever it is, sibling rivalry, whatever.
When
and
you
I'm
were with
very
your
aware of
public
that.
school boy classmates, them hovering over that sausage that you're saving for last at breakfast.
It's
You need to
amazing.
get it in you.
And yes, and because I was the only one who ate liver, I could have as much of that and eat it as slowly as I ever wanted to at school. Unlike some other foods that were on offer. Wow. Okay. Very interesting. And something I notice myself, I eat too fast and I get a esophageal blockage, I think, and it's really painful. And
I'll tell you what you probably get.
Go on.
This is another topic. You probably get a bit of esophageal spasm.
Yes, it's as though the body is saying, no, I'm not going to allow this. Yes.
It's usually central chest pain.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it feels like, oh, I'm dying.
I thought
And then
I
it
was.
lasts for a few seconds or half a minute or so, and then it eases off, and it may
Yes.
come again. Are you getting that?
Yeah. Yes, and
That's esophageal spasm. And by the way, that is very often, I've found clinically, I'm talking about now. I've gone
Yeah.
into doctor mode for a moment. I
Yes.
don't like to do that, but it does happen occasionally.
Okay.
But basically, that is very often undiagnosed. And so people end up having a whole battery of cardiac related tests.
Yes, I
You
can
know,
imagine.
this heart scan, coronary angiography, this, nothing comes up. Okay.
Yeah.
And often the diagnosis is esophageal spasm, because basically, I know you'll remember this from your biology classes at Emmanuel School. By the way, for anyone listening, only very recently, although Carl and I have known each other forever, did I realise that my school played his school at rugby.
But not me personally. You're a rugby bugger.
You.
I am not. I was elsewhere.
I remember your pitches. I actually remember the pitches.
We had great facilities. I wasn't
you
using
did.
them, John. I was at the West End
facilities. Because
yes.
the school that I went to, although it was a rugby playing school, we had clay pitches. And what that meant was it was complete. You would end up literally with your feet completely caked.
Yes,
it did.
Yeah,
it did.
It did. Unlike me,
you know.
Yes, I avoided that at all costs. But anyway, that's
what was I talking about? What was I talking about before I got
it's we went from
that's it. Fine. So you'll remember from your biology classes.
Yes.
The esophagus is basically a tube of muscle.
Yeah.
And the way that food gets down isn't just through gravity. It's you get these waves called peristalsis.
Yeah. Good teachers got a kid to stand on their head and drink a glass of water.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. The point is that muscle can go into spasm.
Yes.
And when it does, it's like cramp in the esophagus. It is very, very uncomfortable.
I get it.
You do feel like you're having a heart attack, you see?
Yes.
Now, in case anyone gets this or suspects that they have it, one remedy for this, by the way, other than chewing your food thoroughly, is magnesium, which is a topic for another day. But magnesium is a very good natural muscle relaxant, if you like. And it usually stops spasms in the body, wherever that muscle happens to be. Right, shall we move on to the next topic?
I just sit it out, and I notice it's rice really brings it on. I don't know if anyone else would concur with that, but rice expands, doesn't it, when you eat it, especially if you don't chew it, I think, and you end up with this coagulation and the condition you describe. Very helpful.
Well, it's funny because last year, at the end of last year, I was in Malta. I was talking to a family relative who basically gets food stuck in his esophagus, and this has gone on from a young age. So it's not like, because sometimes you have to worry about, is that there can be bad things going on in the esophagus, but not if it started when you were 12. It's not normally, do you see? But anyway, normally, people, if they eat something like, I don't know, a pão com chorizo, which for
translation, please. Translation.
Yes, for those, that's basically a sort of bread roll baked with chorizo, like a smoked sausage in it.
Integrated.
Now that combination is quite a thing for the esophagus and the stomach. So that's the sort of thing that can get stuck. But or maybe you eat, I don't know, some chunks of meat or something. But he was saying one of the worst foods for him is rice. And I've not really heard that before.
He's my buddy. He's my esophageal spasm buddy. Okay, so I feel quite validated by that, and but I do know as well, before this turns into the chewing special, that it's all about chewing food and being more mindful. And I doubly injure myself when this occurs, because it's first like, oh God, not this again. I've been unconscious. I've eaten too fast. I'm hurting myself, and I should know better. That's exactly what happens each time.
Well, in a way, what you're using it for is like a warning light coming on in your dash.
Yes.
It's a great reminder. The body does things for a reason. It's the reason it's tired is because it's telling you rest. Do you know what I mean? Or when you get ill and your appetite goes, it's for a reason. It's not just to annoy you. Do you know what I mean? And so this is a classic example of where you, rather than go, well, I'll just plow on regardless. You're actually being very thoughtful about it and going, well, it reminds me that I've eaten too quickly. I haven't eaten mindfully.
Yeah.
And many of us don't eat mindfully. I remember when I first met Sandra, I'd eat some food and she'd look at me in a nice way, by the way, and she'd say something like, did you taste any of that at all?
Or did you drop
do you know
it?
what I mean?
Did you eat that or drop it? Yeah.
Yeah, where's it gone?
Yeah.
But again,
yeah.
food insecurity, just to complete the circle that we were talking
There's a
about
lot
earlier.
going on there, and some really good things to consider with that, which takes us nicely from the physical into the more emotional, psychological, and spiritual realms. I want to run something past you about shadow work. This is an area that I'm particularly interested in, the oggly boggly sort of world. And I noticed trends, and I do love talking about these things to you for your angle on them. And I noticed, embodiment was a thing, and we've had mindfulness as a thing, and we seem to be in the area now of acknowledgement of the dark side. Because we're going to finish today by talking about random acts of kindness, which is very much a positive thinking, positive action thing. But on the dark side, on the shadow side, John, I don't know if that's your experience as well, but if you look at certainly the YouTube channels I look at and some of the spiritual teachers, if you like, talking about trauma, shadow work, and the importance of how we can't really move on or heal or resolve ourselves until we've not just looked at positive thinking, but also looked at what's holding us back from a sort of dark shadow point of view, Jungian point of view. And you asked me a very good and interesting question before we, as we were chatting about what we would be chatting about. What's actionable about that? It's all very well to watch videos about the shadow and how that might be holding us back. And I think we can see that if we watch those sort of videos, how there might be things that are malformed or dysfunctional in us that are hindering our progress in life. But what's the right way to go about putting that right or getting some relief in that department, becoming more functional? And the only thing I could think of was, to get some sort of therapeutic help, go on a workshop. I don't know if there is a formal medical way of dealing with trauma in the shadow. What comes to mind
for you? I'm feeling a homoerotic drumming circle would be probably the right thing.
You know me so well. I can't believe it. Right. Okay. So
I've home got in there, haven't I? By the way, before we go any further,
yes,
can you just describe a bit the shadow? This is Carl Jung, isn't it?
Yes.
Who originally sort of popularized this as an idea.
Yes.
By the way, I don't know that much about it. Okay, so why don't you do the opening salvo on what it is? Okay,
psychology understanding of Carl Mann,
and then I'll chip in where I feel it might be helpful. Go for it.
Well, I've got a lot of sympathy with it, and as I understand it, so to use your earlier example of food, what was it called? You created a pattern of approaching
food insecurity is what I call it.
Food insecurity would be a shadow thing for you, so that now, decades later from the original incident, you sit at a table and that is there in your shadow side, if you like, having an effect in the light, because what's lit is the table, and you aren't eating that in a functional way. You're thinking about the portion, your mind is elsewhere and not necessarily in the intrinsic and natural and nutritional enjoyment of the food. That would be it in a nutshell. So how do we intervene in that? I mean, you've obviously got an angle and a purchase on it because you're aware of it, but how does that move on into a functionality and a health enhancing position rather than remaining something that affects you from the shadow?
Well, it's a good question. So here's what I generally think about these things. A lot of our responses, and to a degree how we behave, comes from patterns that are formed, as you've quite rightly pointed out, much earlier in life. At a time, by the way, where we don't necessarily have the, I would say, either intellectual and or emotional, if you like, maturity and experience to put it in its right place and go, well, I don't really need that. And that's not particularly relevant. In hindsight, you can see possibly the error. It's not really an error, is it? Do you know what I mean? You're 4 years old or whatever, but
yes, an adaptation.
In hindsight, you can see the error. But the problem is because these formed so far back, they're often quite deep in the psyche. They are
the
quite often in the shadows a bit. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes.
What that means is, even if you illuminate them a bit, it doesn't necessarily mean then you can go, oh, what was I thinking? To me, and move on. I'll give you an example of this. So I think I might have mentioned this in another pod, but I am afraid of spiders. You know, little ones, fine. But if there was a spider about this big on this desk, I wouldn't be anywhere near the desk. Now, in a way, it's irrational, because I have all of the power, really. There's nothing that spider, it's not like we're not in Australia. There's nothing that can do to me. But however that fear formed, okay, it's now still in there, and the response is still in there. And me rationalizing about it, or you telling me I don't need to be frightened, isn't going to make any difference, really.
No.
And so a lot of people find with these things, you know, that they've had for a long time, you know, I think we discussed imposter syndrome at some point, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that comes from having a very strong association between our sense of self-worth and achievement, including academic achievement. Do you see? And even when you say, yeah, but hang on, you know, you're a senior this at this organization, whatever, and you earn, you know, £1 million a year, doesn't make any difference.
No.
Because the feeling of not being quite enough got kind of established a long time ago, and it's still there. Does that make sense? Okay, yes. Right. So what can we do about it? Well, if you're going to do any therapy, then it probably needs to be a therapy that has the potential to work at a kind of more unconscious level, a deeper level than talking therapies that are a bit, from my perspective, they might be analytical, but they're not necessarily getting to the root of the problem. You know, a mechanic can tell you, you know, you got a problem with your big end or whatever, but you have to be able to, which is fine. Now you know what's wrong with your engine, but you now have to fix the big end. Do you see? And what I think is that there are certain therapies that actually have the potential to do that. And they include things like hypnotherapy, something called EFT, I've mentioned it before, emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping. And something called EMDR, for example, all of which I've found in reality, in the real world, with real people, with real problems, have the potential to move people on very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Very quickly, often a session or two, maybe 3 sessions, and people can be massively changed and leave that shadow behind. To the extent, by the way, that I've found that if it's successful, and it often is, by the way, there's no panacea. It depends on the therapist, the person, the timing, the setting, all sorts of stuff. But basically, when they do transcend it, it doesn't even really leave a mark, I've found with people. They forget they ever had the problem, is very often how it is.
Yeah.
And they only know that they had a problem because someone will remind them, oh, how are you getting on with it? Oh, haven't thought about it for the last 9 months.
Yeah, that's right. Therapists are often unacknowledged because of this.
Well, that's a very good point. People forget the person maybe that helped them transcend the issue, because it's almost like Etch-a-Sketch. The problem's completely gone, really. It's not that they're managing the issue, it's gone.
Well, that's the sort of transformation.
I've had EFT, I think 5 times in my life for very different things. I may have mentioned this previously, with a very good friend of mine. And honestly, the only time I think about the problems is when I'm reminded of them. I don't remind myself because I've forgotten I ever had the problem. And these are for long-standing,
wonderful
shadow elements of my, you know, things that I don't want other people to know about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I might disclose to a friend, or someone very close to me, but I wouldn't be talking about some of these things even here, where I try and bring myself to the party. Do you know what I mean? I don't, you know, you've known me for, you know what I'm like. I'm hoping you don't see me as particularly different here than you would in a pub.
Yes.
Right? It's not too much difference here, I think, but there's still certain things I wouldn't tell you that are part of the shadow self, okay, that I've found these therapies very helpful for. You don't have to discuss them now because they've gone, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing that I think is probably worth thinking about is you're probably aware that there's, quite a lot of interest now in what are called psychedelics.
Mm.
The psychedelics are things like ayahuasca, DMT, psilocybin, which is in magic mushrooms, for example, MDMA, ecstasy, basically. The idea behind them is that a lot of our problems, these responses and these not very positive, if you like, patterns of behavior relate to something called ego. Okay. And this is how we feel about ourselves, but it's also quite a lot connected with how we feel other people feel about us. Yeah. And if we could drop a lot of that, then we'd live much freer, more liberated, more content, more fulfilled lives.
Yes.
And there is an idea that what psychedelics do is sort of collapse the ego. And I do think that's probably a lot to do with how they work. And very often people, and this is this isn't necessarily going off to, Peru and doing some ceremony. They're even doing this in clinics and in research in London, New York, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? People are having quite brief interventions, okay, and seeing considerable transformation in things like, treatment-resistant depression, for example.
I've got a bit of a theory about
trauma.
this, John.
Yeah, go for
it. The things you're saying are profound and potentially life-changing, and that's why it's not very popular in a way, because in the world of medicine, mechanical things, Western medicine is renowned for its ability to fix things quite quickly and perhaps quite superficially. And I don't mean that's not a negative, that's not a pejorative. That's just broken leg, fix the broken leg. We've got great orthopedic skill. Whereas the workings of the emotional psycho-spiritual world and the implications of fixing those things could be very disruptive to people. If we do go back into our shadow patterns and selves that have created us the way we are, our life is a reflection of that. And if we go tinkering around in that area and attempt to change it, that could be very disruptive. And I think that's what's going on with this work. And that's why I think, it's as though the level of courageousness and bravery in doing that sort of work can be profoundly disruptive to the lives we've created. And that's why it's a little bit of a no-go area, perhaps.
Well, I think there's a couple of things here. One is, I think you're right, but there can be a fear that delving into these areas will be sort of more painful and disruptive than not delving into these areas.
Yes.
And that can keep people from, exploring these areas.
Yep.
But almost always, I think, usually the exploration is worth it. The juice is worth the squeeze, or anyway, let me put it's a net positive.
Let's go.
Okay, for people generally. But there's another disruption I was thinking about when you mentioned the word disruption, which is it disrupts the business of medicine to a certain degree. Okay. Now I don't want to get too cynical.
Yes.
But generally, I don't think many doctors are necessarily complicit in this. I just think it's a failure of the system. Okay.
Yeah.
That the model is that essentially the longer someone can stay a patient, the better for certain people, certain entities, certain businesses. Okay. And what I think psychedelics do is potentially heal people quickly. And therein lies a little bit of a problem, you could argue, to certain entities that may think, well, hang on, but we want these people to be on SSRIs or antipsychotic drugs, hopefully for more or less the rest of their lives, no? Now, I know that sounds very cynical, but I have realized over the years, when I came out of medical school, I think I was very naive, and I actually believed that the whole structure of medicine was about the betterment of individuals and the alleviation of suffering and whatever. But I've actually come to realize that may be true in terms of the intent of doctors, but there's another layer to this where that actually isn't necessarily front and center in the thinking, if that makes sense. So I think there is the potential that treatments like or therapies like psychedelics in the right setting actually do pose a bit of a threat to what is, for want of a better term, a bit of a cash cow.
Yeah.
And that may hold it back a little bit. Now, I think psychedelics and things like it will win out in the end. I'm optimistic about this because there's enough energy and momentum behind them, enough research as well going on, that I think will sort of win out, and maybe, you know, pharma companies will just have to sort of pitch their tents elsewhere,
Very
essentially.
interesting.
But I do think that disruption is a potential force in how widely known things are and how widely accepted they become.
Yes, and you've beautifully, inadvertently, I think, exposed. You were talking about the shadow. That's the shadow side of medicine, isn't it? There is a light and a shadow. The light is the genuine, and we see this, don't we, in other areas of life, education, politics. This is where we're at. I think is the light and the shadow of these industries coming to life. Because teachers, doctors, politicians, I think they start with that spirit that you spoke of, the betterment of the individual and humanity, and then it goes into something else, which is the shadow side, and which we've just talked about. Perfect. I think we'll talk about that again. We've talked about chewing. We've talked about the shadow generally there, and what that might mean, and what sort of help is available that John's mentioned. We'll finish today, John, with random acts of kindness, which you could say is a sort of gateway drug to the psycho-spiritual and understanding how we work emotionally. It is for some people, isn't it? I think practicing a random act of kindness is quite a popular psychology thing, and the positive effect it might have on our lives.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mentioned the gala dinner earlier.
Yes.
And sitting next to the guest speaker.
Your new best mate.
Yeah, that's right. Alvaro, or Alvo, as I call it.
Yes.
But anyway, one of the things that he said in his talk was about how he didn't use his exact words, I'm paraphrasing, how we can, be harking back to the past and regretting things or concerned about the future. This is common in individuals. But the only time that we have is now. And that's exactly right. The past is gone. The future doesn't exist and will never exist. The only time we actually have is now. So I would say, if you want to have a good life, it shouldn't be either in the past or future. It should be in this present moment. And how do you make the present moment as fulfilled as possible? Well, one way, it's not the only way, but one way would be to perpetrate some random act of kindness. Now, what might that be? Well, I don't know. Years ago, I was at Camden Town. This is just before Christmas, and I was at Camden Town tube station in North London, and I was going from one platform to another, so I wasn't leaving the station. But anyway, it's very busy. We're all dutifully filing on the right-hand side of a handrail, and on the left-hand side, it was completely empty. And then I looked up in front of me, and I saw a bloke vault the handrail going down the middle of the staircase.
Anarchy in the UK.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, well, there's a bit of me thinking, good for you. If I had the balls, I'd do it. But actually, what he was doing, he'd spotted up ahead at the top of the stairs a lady with a buggy and a baby who was going to come down the stairs, and he's vaulted it so he could run up the stairs and help her down the stairs with the buggy. Yeah. And I looked at that and I thought, good for him,
Yes,
like he's done a good thing. She's benefited, we hope, and took it in the right spirit, which she probably did. And I'm benefiting, and maybe some other people will benefit. And I was just thinking about that. And then subsequently, I because it was around Christmas that year, this is years and years ago now, I made it my New Year's resolution to perpetrate one random act of kindness each day, at least.
Inspired by that moment.
Just by that, okay.
Yeah, cool.
I thought, well, it's bringing a bit of. So I'll give you an example. I am the sort of person that will pick up a hitchhiker.
Yeah, me too.
And I've had some very good experiences. But first of all, I was a hitchhiker as a student. Every year we'd hitchhike to Amsterdam or Paris or whatever, part of what we call Rag Week or whatever. And I had some great experiences doing that. But I'm not a particularly fearful person, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. I mean, I think if I was a different sex, it might be slightly different. But as it is, I don't mind picking people up, and I've had some very good experiences either in the UK or Portugal or whatever.
Mhm.
Because in a way, you're never going to see these people again, and so sometimes the communication is very open. If that makes sense. But this is just an example, okay? It doesn't have to be something that big. It could be that you pay a compliment. You know, I was at the this conference in Madrid this week, and there was a guy in charge of the AV called Matt, a British guy from a British company, okay? And Matt, I'll just say, was brilliant. Just the way, you know, we need to get you mic'd up. You know, I'd make a joke, he'd laugh about something, we'd talk about, you know, but, you know, sometimes AV people are quite, how can I put it? They're not very social. That's partly why they like looking at
I'm sure.
screens and plugging in things to other things. And then
Yes.
you get people at the other end of the spectrum, like Matt, who really helps put you at your ease, makes a little joke here and there. Do you know what I mean? And I actually told someone else involved with that. I said, "Does Matt work with you, or does he work for your company, or do you hire him in?" And she said, "No, we hire people like Matt in, you know, because there'll be an events company,
Mhm.
and sometimes they have AV in house, if that makes sense, or they hire them in." And I said, "Well, just from my perspective as an end user, okay, Matt's lovely.
Yeah.
Well, in a way, it's a random act of kindness because I don't have to do it." But that reflects well on him. And she said something like, "Oh, I'll tell him because Matt is the boss." But if he had a boss, the lady that I was speaking to could speak to his boss.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
absolutely.
no one
Just hire
comes out
him.
of that thinking, "Oh, that's a terrible thing." Do you know what I mean? I'm just
Yes.
giving you, let's imagine this. You're walking through a door and you turn around and you see someone who's walking towards the door, but they're about 20 meters away. You can either just continue on your way, or you can wait for 10 seconds and keep the door open for them and allow. You see, it's a random
I
act of
get that
kindness.
that situation for me, I go through a whole process with something like that. But
Okay,
generally speaking, it ends with me holding the door open for them. Yes. Yes.
yeah. And what's the end result? All of, I mean, I'll give you another example. Before the gala dinner, there was a drinks reception. I wasn't drinking because I'm working the next day. But anyway, that's a whole other story. And I see a guy with hair like mine. Now, that's very unusual in a corporate setting because normally people are a bit tidier than I am. And I don't know him. Okay. And I just go up to him and he's chatting. I said, "I don't want to interrupt your conversation, although I do." And I say, "I just want
You
to
do.
compliment you on your hair." Like this. It's a joke. And because he's Italian, and I didn't realize that at the time, and you know what I mean? He gets into the joke and we have a laugh about it. And then we ended up having a nice, good conversation. We did a selfie for my gratitude journal and whatever. In a way, it's a random act of kindness. Instead of us not having any interaction at all, I've taken a little bit of a chance and I've extended a sort of like an olive branch of friendship, really, by saying something a little bit unexpected, I suppose. And it turned into a very beautiful moment, if that makes sense. It was brief, but it was
Absolutely.
good.
No,
I saw him a
I
bit.
think it's quite a prosaic example, isn't it, of how we create our reality as well, I would say. And how random acts of kindness connect with creating our reality and view of the world, all from that chap who vaulted the stairway at Camden Town and set you off on that path. I think it's profound.
I'll tell you another thing that I think is useful about this, Carl, is that if you commit to a random act of kindness each day, you're looking for opportunities for random acts of
Yes.
kindness.
Yes.
Your
You're conditioned.
mindset is now, "I need to do one of these today. Where are my opportunities?" Do you
Yes.
see? We've just had
Yes.
our garden dug up for a drain that's been a problem for years, okay? And the guy that was doing the drain is actually English. And he said, "My ex-girlfriend," so he knows what I do because Sandra's told him. I don't mind, do you know what I mean? But I didn't tell him, by the way. You knew what I
mean. Yeah.
No, so I'm not like that, Carl, as you probably know. But anyway, Sandra told him, and then he said, "Do you mind me asking you about my ex-girlfriend? She's got some health issues going on." Well, I could have gone. I'm not this sort of person. I could have gone. Yeah, you ask me tomorrow when you've forgotten, okay, or you've been put off by me saying, "Ask me tomorrow."
Oh, is that the time?
Yeah. It's like those like Bergerac or something where he comes and he interviews someone, and someone's sat behind their desk in their large sort of manor house, and at the end of it, and it's always the same line. They go, "Well, if you'll excuse me, Inspector, I am rather busy."
Yes.
Yeah, that.
Midsomer Murders. Yeah.
Well, if you excuse me, Andy, I am rather busy. But anyway,
sorry,
conversation.
Governor.
Okay.
Yeah.
But part of me is also thinking, okay, this is a random act of kindness. I can get into this, talk about a few things, have a few ideas. And then yesterday, so I'm now back from Madrid. This was before Madrid. Now I'm back from Madrid, and he said something like, "Can I remind you about Sarah, whatever her name is?" And I said, "Yes. Here's my email. Get her to email me," basically. So that's another, just out of this small interaction, that was another opportunity for me actually to, I'm not saying I'm a saint. I'm not. But what I'm saying is that my mindset is that what can you do randomly for someone else for their betterment, not necessarily yours. Now, not as if I don't feel good about doing a good turn. I do.
Yeah, of course.
But then more than me and them maybe also have been. Do you see? It's one of those things. But my mindset is, and this has been for years now, where's my opportunity? Oh, here it is. It's right in front of me here. Well, there's a guy with unkempt hair. I'll go for him then. Do you see what I mean? There's wherever you look, here's a door I can keep open and stand here for 10 seconds rather than think I'm so busy I can't wait for 10 seconds. Do you see?
It's life-changing. It's essentially life-changing, actually life-changing. And interestingly, I have the shadow side of this as well, from which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but I've definitely learned from random acts of kindness. And it's funny, it triggered all sorts of memories for me there, John. One of which is picking up a hitchhiker. And I thought I'd done an amazing job heading back to the southwest of England where I was living, picking this person up because they told me they were from Turkey. I was thinking, this maybe they come from a war-torn situation. They've come to work in the UK. It's actually turned out he's from Torquay. I just misheard him on this situation. So there's me, virtue. A lot of these two anecdotes, and there are more. Just are the kind of how great I thought I was, and then finding out how not that great I was, but that was great to find out anyway, because I could see what I was up to in this whole process. Another notable one in the mid-90s is when I think it was probably when I was first aware of this idea of random acts of kindness, and I used to wear a badge actually as well. Something wonderful is about to happen. I was incorrigibly positive at that time, and I started a positive magazine for Sheffield, and I was in a Sheffield hospital with this badge on. Something wonderful is about to happen, affirming the wonder and miracle of life. And I got in a lift in the Royal Hallamshire Hospital, and these two blokes got in the lift, and I saw my badge. Something wonderful is about to happen. Well, he doesn't bloody work here then, does he? Was there? They said to me in this hospital. And in this same time, I remember finally, because this is a long podcast today, I thought my worthy act of kindness was I was eating a sandwich, I think, and I saw a homeless guy outside a shop. And I think I might have gone up to him and said, do you want the other half of this, mate? I've only just eaten the first bit. Do you want the rest of this? And to my surprise, he said, well, what is it? And I said, I think, cheese and ham or whatever, coronation chicken, like you do.
Yeah.
He said, no, I don't really like that. I thought, screw you, man. And I got to see what an ideologically motivated virtue signaler I was by, thinking this man should have some of my food because he was worse off than me. I thought afterwards, fair play to the bloke. Why should he have to have my leftovers or, Lord
BLT?
Yeah, Yeah, might be well, I'll bloody have it then. I was enjoying that. But there is that side to it as well, because you get to observe yourself in these situations, don't you?
No, but this is very important because before we go, I just want to say this. First of all, if you're going to perpetrate a random act of kindness, you cannot be, not that you're suggesting this, but you cannot be in fear of what might happen subsequently and how well or not it's received. You can't be
detached.
fear.
You've got to be detached from the result.
And you absolutely have to be detached from the outcome generally and take what comes. Okay. So that, the somehow the value of the random act of kindness is not pegged to the apparent outcome.
Yes.
It's in doing it. It's not the response. That's quite important, because you have to be fearless.
Yes.
You have to be fearless. You have to be, like the hair thing. If he turned around and sort of went, "What are you talking about? Are you or me?" Like, okay, well, I'll have to take that, but it wouldn't stop me, we would hope, saying a similar thing to a similar person at another time. Do you see? You can't be racked by insecurity.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that has been Chewing Shadow Work and Random Acts of Kindness on an extended life support podcast. Love to hear what you think about those subjects and suggestions for any others, right, John? Pop them
Yes, and please subscribe and whatever, like or whatever.
All of that, yeah, as a random act of kindness.
Yeah,
towards us,
beautiful.
Without any
beautiful
reward. Ciao. Okay, cheers, John. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.
See you next week. Bye-bye.